Lubitsch has a number of films already in the collection, namely Clooney Brown, To Be or Not to Be, Design for Living, Heaven Can Wait, and Trouble in Paradise. And that, of course, was recently announced for a 4K upgrade in the collection coming in a few months' time. Ernst Lubitsch was a German and American film director born in Berlin in 1892. He spent the early part of his career as an actor, debuting on stage in An Ideal Husband from Oscar Wilde. He decided to abandon acting and become a director. In 1918, he made his mark with Die Augen des Mumie, The Eyes of the Mummy, a silent film starring Paula Negri. Now, he alternated between escapist comedies and large-scale historical dramas, but his career really took off when he left Germany for Hollywood in 1922. He had, at that point, directed over 40 films in Germany. He directed Mary Pickford in Rosita, but the star and the director clashed personalities during the filming. But he was signed to a 3-year, 6-picture deal, and he got a reputation for sophisticated, sparkling comedies. But these were only marginally profitable for Warner Brothers at the time. His contract with them was dissolved, and he went on to work for MGM, with films such as The Student Prince in Old Heidelberg and The Patriot for Paramount Pictures, which earned him his first Academy Award nomination as a director. Now, with the advent of sound, Lubitsch turned to directing musicals, and now, of course, we come to the 4 musicals in this Eclipse set. The Love Parade stars Maurice Chevalier and Jeanette MacDonald. It's a pre-code musical comedy and focuses on the marital upsets of Queen Louise of Sylvanus, Jeanette MacDonald, and her consort, Count Alfred Renard, played by Maurice Chevalier. Sylvania has a problem with its ambassador in France, Count Alfred Renard. Largely, he can't stop seducing anything that moves. Now, Renard is swiftly recalled to his homeland, where he catches the eye of young unmarried Queen Louise, of course, played in the film by Jeanette MacDonald, who immediately thinks he might just be the man for her. Renard isn't averse to marrying into royalty, though, but quickly finds himself chafing in the role of the prince consort. Now, this isn't what marriage is supposed to be. The husband doesn't defer to the wife. It is, of course, a slightly dated version of marriage, and the Love Parade could be seen nowadays as a very light piece of Taming of the Shrew style action, where a strong woman learns true happiness and sometimes being the number 2 in the couple. The fact that despite this, the Love Parade is still charming nonetheless, funny and more than a little delightful, is really due to the immensely skilled lightness from the direction it gets by Ernst Lubitsch. It feels as if the whole sweet confection could just burst with a puff of strong air and the huge charm of its leading actors. Now, The Love Parade was one of the first talkie musicals, and it's assembled with such pace and energy by Ernst Lubitsch at his very best that you almost don't really notice how often it's forced into static framing for the talking and the singing. That's where couples frequently sit or stand opposite each other to burst into song. Now, that's because the film is awash with swift intercutting, taking place between different locations. The cutting is often to great comic effect, not least cutting away to groups of ministers, soldiers and servants who excitingly are commenting from afar on the lead's first date, and intermixes with smoothly seductive tracking shots through grand Habsburg-style sets. Lubitsch's film, however, uses sound effectively and remarkably. Establishing his confidence with sound, it opens with us overhearing dialogue from outside a room, before the door swings open and we see Maurice Chevalier stride in and confide directly to us. Sound is used throughout for comic effect, either in its presence or the highly suggestive 400 cannon blasts on the night of the wedding, or indeed the frustrated drumming of fingers on the table our happy couple do in the midst of an early row to the awkwardly quiet march past of a group of soldiers. They're trying not to disturb the Queen's lion. It's all creative stuff, considering the limitations at that particular time, and it bounces effectively off the parade of songs and indeed from the witty dialogue that powers the film throughout. Now, it's interesting to note here that a more natural partnership actually seems to develop between their two servants. Now, that's Renard's valet, Jacques, played by Lupino Lane, and Louise's maid, Lulu, played by Lillian Roth. Now, Lane and Roth both give energetically charming comedic performances here, and also, by far, the most engaging and dynamic musical sequences. The highlight here is Let's Be Common. That song brilliantly uses Lupino's double-jointed flexibility to stage the film's most overtly entertaining number. And there is a Mozartian quality, indeed, to these super smart servants. So much so that I'd willingly trade a few of Maurice Chevalier or even Jeanette MacDonald's numbers for a couple more with them. Now, that, of course, doesn't mean to disparage the stars. Chevalier's comic skills are exploited to the maximum here. His reaction to being shot in the opening sequence is indeed a masterclass in timing, and it's a part he invests with huge charm, which sells Renard's slight selfishness as genuine likability. Ernst Lubitsch throws in a few neat gags about his accent, not least Renard's penchant to voice his frustrations in perfect rat-a-tat French to bewildered Sylvanians. He's deeply disappointed, though, when he asks one obstructive courtier if he speaks French, only to get the answer, yes. Jeanette MacDonald is also skillfully sharp and just frustrating enough from an opening scene where he can't find her a consort, despite the fact she doesn't want one, to her mix of romanticism and imperiousness that runs throughout the film. The Love Parade is an engaging and funny Lubitsch masterclass in his particular genre of sophisticated comedy, as well as being a strikingly original use, of course, of sound and music. It remains engaging and entertaining today. The second film in the set is Monte Carlo. It's a 1930 American pre-code musical comedy co-starring Jack Buchanan, Rudolph Falliere, who is masquerading as a hairdresser. And again, we have Jeanette MacDonald as Countess Hélène Marat. Now, the film is famous for introducing the song Beyond the Blue Horizon, written, of course, for the film and first performed by MacDonald, and a chorus as she escapes on the train through the countryside. The film was hailed by critics as a masterpiece of the newly emerging musical film genre. The screenplay was based on the Booth Tarkington novel Monsieur Beaucaire. Other songs in Monte Carlo are Give Me a Moment Please, Always in Always, She'll Love Me and Like It, Day of Days, Trimming the Woman, and Whatever It Is, It's Grand. Now, in the film, there's some nice interplay taking place, as Jack Buchanan's famous is played for joshing, as Rudolph's role as a hairdresser soon means that he finds his own sexuality questioned by the Countess. Besides his own unfortunate last name of Farriere, before anyone rushes to their OEDs, the slang fairy has been around since the late 19th century. Now, there's also the moment that, upon seeing him for the first time, the Countess re-enters her room and removes her robe. Now, she clearly feels safe around him. And then, of course, there's the moment where Hélène finally calls him out, saying she doesn't believe he's a man, and he responds to her by putting his hairdresser's uniform back on. Now, he finally embodies and surpasses the role as he passionately kisses her. Distressed by her own passion, she demurely complains, "Well, that's what you get for being nice to your servants." Now, with Monte Carlo, Lubitsch displays his usual visual cleverness. The movie opens with a wedding processional and ceremony across an open courtyard wrecked by rain that indicates the foppish groom and the missing bride without uttering a word. Now, one of the most notable motifs of the film is preponderance of keys and locks. But Ernst Lubitsch is much more than a visual artist. He has plenty of fun with sound along the way. Jeanette MacDonald's first big number in the film, Beyond the Blue Horizon, sees her optimistic song of hope as her train journeys towards Monte Carlo, met of course with a chorus of eager and happy farmers out in the fields. And that adds a dimension of musicality to the outside world. One memorable bit during the number Trimming the Women sees the three singers belting out a verse with their mouths full of food. And the film's climax is set at an opera whose plot mimics that of the film itself and features some delightful pantomime and a wonderful subversion of the musical cliches that are sweeping the new talkie art form at that time. And then there's the merely sly stuff in the film, like the way that Rudolph's head massages induce in Hélène orgasmic groans that certainly wouldn't get past the censors a half a decade later. While Monte Carlo isn't one of Lubitsch's greatest films, merely at that point, but there's no doubt that he already had a handle on the budding musical comedy genre of that time. Apparently, MacDonald didn't share the enthusiasm that many film buffs felt for her early groundbreaking musicals. For instance, during a screening of Monte Carlo many years later at the Museum of Modern Art, she laughed openly at all the wrong places, and so irritating the audience that an usher was sent to quiet her. Now, the third film in this set is called The Smiling Lieutenant. It's a 1931 pre-code musical comedy, again starring Maurice Chevalier, Claudette Colbert, and Miriam Hopkins, and this was released by Paramount Pictures. It's written by Samson Raphaelson and Ernest Vaja from the operetta Ein Walzertraum by Oscar Strauss. It has a libretto by Leopold Jackson and Felix Dorman, which in turn was based on the novel called Nux der Prinzgemahl, Nux the Prince Consort, and that was written by Hans Müller-Einigen. Now, the film was nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards that year, and this was the first of 3 films directed by Lubitsch, starring Miriam Hopkins. The other 2, of course, were Trouble in Paradise and Design for Living. At this point, it's worth mentioning the Lubitsch touch, as a phrase coined as such because it was used to describe the unique style and cinematic trademarks of Ernst Lubitsch. The phrase does connote something light, strangely indefinable, yet nonetheless tangible. And seeing Lubitsch's films more than almost any other director's work, you can certainly feel this certain spirit, not only in the tactful and impeccably appropriate placement of the camera and the subtle economy of his plotting, but also in the oblique dialogue, which had a way of saying everything through indirection, but also, and particularly in the performance of every single player, no matter how small the role was. Now, as far as The Smiling Lieutenant itself is concerned, it's probably important to point out that it was never designed to be a showcase for the diminutive blonde starlet from Georgia. As you'll see, she only had 4th billing on the marquee and was merely regarded as a suitably photogenic newcomer when she was cast to play the part of a naive and sheltered princess from the mythical nation of Flausenthrum. I had to make sure that I said that right, as those of you who've seen the film will readily understand. Now, I figure Jeanette MacDonald had priced herself out of this role by 1931, although I'm fairly sure that she would have been great in the role, but we can be grateful that Miriam Hopkins got the part instead, and as such got the opportunity to showcase her comedic chops, as it opened the door to a pair of truly brilliant performances under Lubitsch's guiding hand very soon thereafter. Now, besides Lubitsch himself, who was already garnering a huge reputation as one of Hollywood's top directors, the Smiling Lieutenant's big draw was the one and only Maurice Chevalier, who occupied the title role of Lieutenant Nicky von Prane, with his distinctive brand of savoir-faire. But it's hard not to laugh at the simple, cartoony silliness of his shtick. as he plays essentially the same character in each of the 3 Lubitsch musicals here. Now, a supposedly insatiable ladies' man who's got a witty innuendo and an irresistible erotic charm, which is in surplus for any and all opportunities to spend a little while in sweet embrace. Now, though Chevalier may not pass muster by today's standards of masculine eye candy, the guy is definitely a born showman who, for better or worse, epitomised a certain romantic archetype. Even among the female leads, Hopkins is relegated to second fiddle, since her character plays the piano. In 1931, Claudette Colbert was the bigger star, and she's given both more screen time and more sympathetic role as Francie, the working-class girl who makes her living as band leader of an all-female orchestra called the Viennese Swallows. And she spends most of her appearance in The Smiling Lieutenant as Nicky's true but temporary love interest. And finally, we have the 4th film in the set, 1 Hour with You. Marc Chevalier again and Jeanette MacDonald star with Genevieve Tobin as a temptress best friend who's double-crossing her friend to seduce the husband in Ernst Lubitsch's witty 1 Hour with You. Now, this is not as frivolous as it first might appear. The film's set in spring, in Paris, and Dr. André Berthier, played by Marc Chevalier, and his wife of 3 years, Colette, played by Jeanette MacDonald, are still happily married. Colette's flirtatious school chum, Mitzi Olivier, that's Genevieve Tobin, visits and makes a serious play for André. Now, he tries to resist her, but in one of his many asides to the audience, exclaims that he's only human. When the Berthiers hold a dinner party, André switches place cards with Mademoiselle Marcel in order to avoid sitting next to Mitzi. Colette mistakenly thinks her husband is chasing after Mademoiselle Marcel, and it leads to the scheming Mitzi getting André to her apartment for some romance. Mitzi's professor husband, Roland Young, hires a private detective to follow her and uses the infidelity to file for a divorce. To get even with André, Colette gets his best friend Adolphe, Charles Ruggles, to admit kissing her and thereby in her eyes making the husband and wife's infidelities equal. The couple then ask the rhetorical question, what would you do? Their answer, of course, is an embrace. Now, the songs in this film aren't all that great, but nevertheless they were fitting and lively. They are But Spring Is Here, What a Little Thing Like a Wedding Ring Will Do, We Will Always Be Sweethearts, 3 Times a Day, and 1 Hour with You, It Was Only a Dream Kiss, We Will Always Be Sweethearts, and finally, What Would You Do? With a deft pre-code sexual simplicity, terrific cast, rhyming dialogue, fourth wall breakdown and light charming songs, it's really easy to see why 1 Hour with You demonstrates the Lubitsch touch. And as with everything he did, Lubitsch added a layer here and there to provide depth to the gay look, feel and music, with real complex attitudes about women, men, sex, friendship and marriage. An hour can feel like a moment. 1 Hour with You demonstrates in melody, rhyme and lightness, and a moment's yield to whim, and it can lead to an hour's agony. And what to make of any given moment and hour is ultimately up to you. So there are 4 musicals in the Eclipse set number 8, Ernst Lubitsch musicals, and I suggest you get hold of this Blu-ray, as the quality is definitely an improvement on the previous DVD set. Now, the 4 films breakdown is as follows. The Love Parade has a running time of 107 minutes, it's in black and white and has an aspect ratio of 120:1. Monte Carlo has a running time of 90 minutes, it's in black and white and has an aspect ratio of 120:1. The Smiling Lieutenant has a running time of 89 minutes, it's in black and white and has the same aspect ratio. And finally, An Hour with You has a running time of 80 minutes and it's in black and white and has an aspect ratio of 137:1. Now, all 4 films were restored in 4K resolution by Universal Pictures, and that was in collaboration with the Film Foundation. Sadly, though, although they are 4K restorations, they're all just Blu-rays here in the Criterion collection. These elegant but somewhat bawdy films made pre-code feature early performances by some early Hollywood stars, such as Maurice Chevalier, Jeanette MacDonald, Claudette Colbert and Miriam Hopkins, and the style of comedy that became known thereafter as the Lubitsch touch. Eclipse Series 8 Lubitsch musicals releases on Blu-ray on Tuesday the 17th of February in the US only, and they contain an essay by the author and film critic Michael Koreski. Next time on Let's Talk Criterion, we'll be taking a look at the 1976 film Network, directed by Sidney Lumet, starring Faye Dunaway and Peter Finch, coming to the collection on 4K UHD. So until then, from me, as always, it's goodbye, and above all, good Criterion viewing.